Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome back to the very first episode of what could be a weekly thing. It's going to be the Esports Talk Show, pretty much where all of you guys send me in topics, send me in subjects, and I talk about them just one at a time, once per week. Now this week's going to be CSGO based, thanks to all of you guys. I did try on Twitter, I'll link my tweet down below. If you guys want me to talk about anything, any piece of news, any topic out there that is controversial, debatable, feel free to respond to my tweet down below, because these people, well yeah, I can't trust a lot of you guys on Twitter. Okay? All you guys do is send me troll things, talk about your time in the zoo, talk about your long neck. If you guys could send me some esports material to actually talk about, I would greatly appreciate that. So every Saturday, the goal is here to take a few minutes out of your day, out of my day, to talk about some topics. The first of which one, if you guys could tell by the thumbnail, which was sent in to us, is should we be blaming Tarik and Stewie for leaving the old Cloud9 roster? Now, a topic I really wanted to talk about, and along with that, a buddy of mine told me that if I somehow stuck paper in front of my face that it would slow my speech down. So let's break it down. Welcome to the very first ever Esports Talk Show. If you guys do enjoy, feel free to leave a comment down below, and let's break it down. The question: do you blame Tarik for leaving Cloud9? And it's kind of crazy the way that this whole gaming scene works, because when it first happened, right, when they first left around the same time, I believe within actually 2 weeks of each other, they left that roster, then went to, of course, mibr later on. I thought, yeah, it seems pretty scummy to have two players coming off a recent major victory to leave a roster. That was my first initial thought at the time, but now when this topic is brought back up some time later, it's kind of weird how hypocritical you can be without even knowing it. Now I think about it and say, no, I don't blame them, because when you look at the results of that former Cloud9 roster and the potential that mibr had, how can you truly blame these players for wanting to leave for a potentially better roster when they were on a roster, that being in Cloud9, who had been stagnant for quite some time? So I went ahead, pulled up some stats for all of you to actually confirm this, and let's first look at their time with mibr. It was kind of ironic as well, as they both joined mibr together, so too they left mibr together about 6 months on that roster, and I would say some pretty decent performances, but maybe not what you would expect out of the mibr roster they were. Although I will say pretty much all of their success was during the time that Tarik and Stewie were there. So far, they actually had one win at Zotac Cup. Don't take too much away from that, guys. Zotac is pretty much like WESG, but lower prize pool. Only 8 teams were there. It was mibr, the by far and away best team. Guess who the next 3 teams were in ranking wise? Optic, Tyloo, and Virtus Pro. So is it a surprise mibr won this? No, it should not have been. So that's one of their victories there. I believe 200k prize pool, a couple second place finishes at ECS as well as Blast Pro. I think it was Istanbul. And then for majority, pretty much top 4 finishes around the board. But during this time, remember, it was well noted during this time as well, with Yanko as coach, that this team was not living up to its expectations. Although stat-wise, a bunch of top 4 finishes, and along with that, over 6 months time, 560k in prize pools, so about 100k a month. Not looking too shabby. Then we bounce to their time with Cloud9, and this is where it gets a bit interesting, because it seems to be quite even what they did with mibr, but in some different senses, which I'll explain in a second here. So with this roster, it was actually Tarik. He had joined for a shorter amount of time. Stewie was with this old Cloud9 roster for over 2 years, and Tarik was nearly there for just 1 year. So let's look at their last year together to see the actual results that happened before these guys decided to finally leave this Cloud9 roster. 3 victories, one of them being Cyber Power PC, the other iBuyPower Masters. Both those victories, as you guys can imagine, are heavily NA based. Along with that, not really your top tier competition. So just like mibr won Zotac Cup, this is not really too stellar. And of course, their 3rd victory, most notable, that being at the major at Boston, one of the most miraculous majors I will ever see, and in my book as the single best major grand finals we will ever see as well. Woo, North America. And here's where it gets interesting though. When we looked at those mibr stats with these 2 players, it was by far and away a majority top 4 finishes, which obviously by, pretty easy, pretty easy there, kind of correlation. Every event they went to, they usually finished top 4. They usually went to the semifinals or higher. Now, with that being said, Cloud9 across so many more events across the year these two were there, by far and away majority finishes were actually top 8 finishes, and more so than not 7th to 8th place finishes, which means yes, they're making playoffs. They go out usually in the quarterfinals, and it was pretty overwhelmingly how many times they did that, especially towards the tail end of Tarik and Stewie being there. So that really comes into effect of, maybe why they did leave. Now, again, there's been a bunch of tweets out there surfacing, of course, the old Jack tweet, CEO of Cloud9 himself, calling it an abandonment because these guys had just won a major and shortly afterwards they decided to leave the roster. But here's where it really comes into effect. You really get to see that this team was not getting better. They were a miracle team at the major. Let's keep that in mind. Remember, they actually were 0-2 in the group stage. The only team in CSGO history to go 0-2 in group stage, come back and win the entire major. The only other team that got close to that was ENCE, of course, at Katowice. They make the grand finals and lose to Astralis. So that feat, no one is doubting that was a miraculous run. They could not match that if they tried ever again, and that's probably the mentality these players had to have, right? This team was not a major contending team constantly. They were a major contending team once, and maybe Stewie and Tarik had that same iffy feeling, and they thought, hey, we can go to a better team, so who am I to blame those guys? All in all, across 12 months, 6 months mibr, just short of 600k prize pools, 12 months with Cloud9, including the 500k major victory, which is pretty important here. Almost $1 million in prize pool earnings. No doubt in my mind, these guys can make some money no matter what team they play for. When you look at finishings, you look at overall prize pool, though, spread across the time they were actually there, mibr is certainly the better pick here, and along with that, it ended up being just an overall stronger team. So to answer the question in plain English for all of you guys, do I blame Stewie and Tarik? No. In the heat of the moment, as a North American fan, did it look a bit skeptical? Certainly did, right? But again, we don't know the internal issues, and that's one thing across all this CSGO news. We're never going to know, right? We will never know the internal issues these guys went through, and so to answer that question 100% fairly, well, we'd have to know all those details. So yeah, that's going to do it for the notes, and I think I've been speaking fast. You guys can be the judge of that. Compare this to a regular CSGO news episode. Have I been talking faster than that, or a little bit slower maybe? I don't think I have been. It doesn't help when I just chug caffeine before these episodes. But very lastly, now we look at where these guys ended up. I'll put my notes down because that will be simply NRG Tarik and, of course, Liquid Stewie2k. And I don't think any of us can judge now. I'm kind of a question for all of you guys, but it should be pretty obvious. Are these two players now better off than they were when they were once on Cloud9? Did they ultimately make the best decision for themselves? That's what you have to ask yourself, and at this point, there's no denying it. Now, I think for NRG, a bit more debatable because this weekend at Starladder Season 7, and actually, at the point of you guys watching this video, they'll be proving if Tarik made the right decision, but with Stewie, there's no debate, guys. The number of second place finishes, I said the number of grand final appearances these guys have made ever since Stewie has joined, they are the single best North American team, and Cloud9 now is fighting to be a top 5 North American team. There is no doubt in my mind, especially when it comes to even NRG currently, that they would compete, if not beat Cloud9, given the fact we don't even know their starting roster. They have lost so much time and time again over the past 12 to 14 months, including it began with Tarik and Stewie. So if there's one thing you want to blame Tarik and Stewie for, maybe it's the unraveling of the Cloud9 roster, but nonetheless, where they are right now, can we blame them? No, they made the best decisions for themselves, and it's not even close. All right, first talk show done. If it worked, let me know in the comment section. Hope you guys all enjoy. As always, my name is Jake. I'll see you back here Monday breaking down results and more esports and CSGO news. Until then, take care, you guys. Drink caffeine. Have a great frick. See ya.